All right, and we are here on our debut episode here under the lights 804. We are here under the lights here on a beautiful Monday evening here. We got a special guest. We got one of our mainstays this time of year, late August. You know, we got to have our guy, Danny Lewis from Virginia Preps. What's going on, Danny? How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's game week. It's a little bit nicer out than it was last year. I remember the first game I went to last year. It was hot, it was humid, and I sweat all night long, as did every other media member that was at the game. So, having these 70, 80-degree days this week, that's football weather.
It's awesome, and it almost felt like summer is. It almost feel like summer is almost over. Like it's far as the.
Yeah, I think it got so hot so quick early this summer, and now we're kind of like seeing a premature fall. I don't know.
Yeah. And as we talk that essentially this is game week here in the 804. So Danny, what are some top storylines to watch heading into this season?
I'm glad you asked because I have a plentiful amount.
All right.
So, obviously the big one I think everybody's interested in is Verona. Can they get back to the state championship? Can they live up to the hype with all these additions they've made since last season? Farley from, I think St. Chris, I think he came from, Sir Paul Cheeks. There's Darren Williams from Henrico. There's a lot of new additions on an already talented team. And it's like, now the question is, can you meet those expectations? Can you deliver? That's the biggest one I think that's out there. LC Birds moving to Class 6. I think everybody's interested to see how they do against the Oscar Smiths of the world. And hey, we might get a Battle of Chester too, if they meet up in the playoffs, them and Thomas Dale. So that's always fun. Springer's returning to Class 5. That's a big deal. They reigned supreme previously in Class 5, So can they recapture that magic? We'll see. I think about the Richmond schools. Can Huguenot, Armstrong, TJ, can they continue to build on what they've done? Can they get over the hump? TJ's the only one to make it to the state semifinals in recent memory, but that was 2019. Can Huguenot make that jump? To do it, they got to beat somebody like Verona, and that's no easy task. But they have a talented team themselves. So, it's kind of the Richmond Renaissance is a great story, but now it's like, okay, we need you to make that jump, that leap. And then programs like John Marshall and what was Richmond George with, can they get up there with the Armstrongs, the TJs, the Huguenots, because they're kind of lagging as far as the Richmond City schools go. I hate to bring it up, but we're in a championship drought. I know Benedictine, which is private school, won last year, but nobody public school-wise from the 804 has won a state championship since 22. So we've got a 2-year absence, and that, we've run the state for the past I'd say the past decade since realignment. And now we're kind of like, okay, can we continue to run this house, or are we now taking a step back? Tom Hall, he has a chance to get his 200th win this week versus Glen Allen. If it's not this week, it's going to be soon. 200 watches on. And then one that I really am interested in, and it's going to feed us the entire season, is we got 27 games where teams are facing each other for the first time this year. So that's kind of unique. We haven't had that where we've had new matchups. So that's something to whet your appetite.
Oh yeah, definitely add some intrigue to this upcoming season for sure. I know we talked about some contenders in this area, but also which Richmond teams do you see as legitimate contenders for a state championship run?
So there's two that there's two that I absolutely feel could be playing for a state championship, and that's Verona, obviously. And I know this is a reach, but I really like what Manchester's put together over there. I know they play in Class 6, so they're going to have to deal with Oscar Smith, but they have a very experienced team. They've made some additions to their team, and I think they could be, if they don't get there, they're at least going to make a deep run and make an attempt at it. Those are the two biggest ones I see. Obviously, Holland Springs, I don't want to miss out on the Springers, but we got to see what they can do now that they're back in 5. You know, Mari's been running the show since they went to 6, so we need to see if the Springers can reclaim that magic. I won't rule them out, but those are the legitimate contenders. Now, there are some teams that I think could sneak up and get there. I'm thinking about a Huguenot, a Dinwiddie, Armstrong, TJ. I'll even throw one wild one at you is I like what Hermitage has got. They've got a mix of youth and experience, and I think they have, as long as they stay healthy and as long as they play to what I believe they can play, they might make some noise.
And I know we talked about as far as the contenders. What are some teams? And I know you kind of alluded to with like the Hermitages and Manchester's. What are some other teams that could surprise people in 804?
So that's a difficult question this year. Usually I have a couple of teams that I fall in love with during the off season that I go, I really like what these guys are doing. And the guys that I mentioned, like a Hermitage, yeah, I do like what they're doing. But I feel like this year there's like kind of the haves and have-nots. There's a big disparity as accustomed to previous seasons. So there's about 6 teams that I think could exceed the expectations. But don't mistake that for they're going to make this incredible run. But they're a team that is probably might finish better than what we think and maybe crash the playoff party. I'm thinking about a team like Mechanicsville. They've had some rough seasons, 1-2 win seasons. I was looking at their schedule just this weekend and looking at what they return, and I'm thinking they could get off to maybe a 5-0 start, which would be incredible for them. And maybe they sneak into the playoffs, maybe as an 8 or a 7 seed. That's a big accomplishment for that program. Petersburg, Jerome Mathis is now the head coach. I hear a lot of good things are happening down there. Could they be a team that kind of comes up in 3A and make some noise, play spoiler? I don't know. Prince George with Coach Tom Hall, they're not a surprise, but it's a case of they could. We all know what Coach Hall can do with a team, but Prince George is Prince George. They don't have that level of success that, say, a Verona Holland Springs does. So if he can get that team where we think they're headed, that's going to be a team you're going to want to watch. Godwin has a young quarterback, some key offensive weapons back. They could make a splash this year. One of the teams that I'm really think people are sleeping on is Midlothian. I think they could be a strong team in the Dominion District. And then Powhatan. Coach George Bland did a great job at Freeman. He's now at Powhatan. The cupboard is bare. He's got a lot of youngsters coming up that are inexperienced, but he does have a quarterback and a wide receiver, Elliott Murphy, and oh gosh, the name just escaped me, Ben Whitver. they could do. I mean, those two showed us what they can do last season. They could be a team that people are sleeping on this season because of the youth movement, and they might surprise us and make a playoff push.
See, and also we talked about some first-time matchups per se going on this upcoming season. Outside of that as well, too, which games do you think will have the biggest impact on playoff seedings this season?
Oh, that's easy. Just look at Verona and Holland Springs schedule.
True.
But in truth, I mean, there are other games, obviously. I'm thinking about Armstrong, TJ. They meet in the second week of the season this year, which is, I've heard a lot of people say they like it. I personally don't like it. I like it when they meet later in the season and they're both undefeated and it's, got a little bit more story to it. But hey, I'm not going to turn it away either. LC Bird and Thomas Dale, rivals playing in the same class now. That's going to have a points impact. Freeman, Prince George. Both teams might be fighting for a playoff spot this year in Region 5C. Dinwiddie schedule, I put it right there with Verona, Holland Springs. Every game is going to have an impact on, especially for Verona and Dinwiddie and Huguenot. Those three teams are going to be fighting for that top seed because 4B is going to be a gauntlet. You do not want to have to go to somebody else's house and play in November. I'm thinking about Louisa Matoaka. Not sure what we've got in Matoaka this year. They lost a lot of talent, but Matoaka's 5C, Louisa's 4B. Louisa's in that region with Verona, Dinwiddie, Huguenot. They can't afford to trip up. Matoaka's going to be fighting for a playoff spot. Thomas Jefferson Hopewell. That's one of those they haven't played since 1987. So that's going to be a fun one to watch because TJ's in Class 2, Hopewell's in Class 3. Both have heavy aspirations for this season. Another ratings war. Hanover Atlee, another set of rivals, both in 4B. Both are going to be fighting for a playoff spot. Prince George, Thomas Dale. Dale is dominant in that series, but Tom Hall has a way with Dale over the last few years. And if he can get Prince George over the hump, that becomes an interesting matchup for playoff seeding. And Hermitage, Glen Allen. Glen Allen's back in Class 5, back in Region 5C. Those two are separated by like 5 minutes. So you're talking about another rivalry and another fight for a playoff spot. So those are interesting. And then I'll just give you one last thing. The final week of the season, I have 7 games that could impact the seeding going into the final week of the season. So, I mean, it just makes it so much fun to think about.
Yes. Like the possibilities are so endless. You definitely for sure.
And things are obviously going to change throughout the season. We know that. Things happen. Players get injured. We saw Eric Bird get injured last year for Holland Springs, change the complexion. We saw the rise of Dayron Ferguson. Things are going to happen. But when you're looking at the season and nothing's happened yet, and you're just mind is just rolling with matchups and what could be and what could happen. Yeah, it's fun.
Absolutely. And what I'm really impressed about this area, it's finally I'm starting to see like everyone's taking notice of the talent that we have here in 804, and it's finally like coming to fruition. What are some top players in the Richmond area that fans should need to know about?
And I could go on and on with some of the players. How long we got?
Hey.
So, I wrote some names down at each position for you because we've got more talent than what I've written down, but these are the guys that stood out for me. Just at quarterback alone, I'm thinking of guys like Gibson Gross in Midlothian, Landon Abernathy in Manchester. I already mentioned I think they could be a contender this year for a state title. Charles Scott Jr. at Huguenot. He split time with Linwood Johnson last year. Scott showed off a lot. He's already got offers, and he hasn't even played a full season yet. And then obviously Caleb Weiss at Verona. We know what he can do. He's an all-metro region player. I mean, he is a true athlete, just like any of these guys. Running back, Dayron Ferguson, mentioned him and what he did at Highland Springs last year. Now he's at TJ, ready to lead that team at the run game. Eric Bird, he's healthy, I'm hoping. So we get to see what he can do. He had a phenomenal sophomore season, cut short last year, but I'm excited to see him again. Sir Paul Cheeks, Verona. I mean, Verona's got a stable of backs, Cheeks, Darren Williams, Farley. I mean, those guys right there, you could name an all-star team just from Verona's football team. Hewlett, Prince George, he burst onto the scene last year. He attributed a lot to their making the playoffs. Wide receiver, I think of guys like Damari Carter at Verona, Amari Goff at TJ, Avion Lewis. I don't know if you've seen him play yet, but he's at Huguenot, and he's been phenomenal since the day he stepped on the field as a freshman. Ben Whitver at Powhatan, I already mentioned. There's a young man we need to keep an eye on in Hopewell. I hope I pronounce his name right. Zevion Grammer. He's a youngster, but he showed promise last year. I'm thinking of O-linemen. If you saw Armstrong last year, can't remember. Devon Epps. He is a beast. They've got several beasts on that Armstrong team. I felt like a little boy standing next to some of them. I'm old enough to be some of their fathers, but that's how big these guys are. Hank Beach from Freeman. T-Ron Richardson at Hopewell. Brody McNeil at Godwin. I could go on with the offensive lineman. One that I don't know that anybody has realized, but I think Brady Sakowitz, he was at Trinity last year. He's now at Cosby. He's going to be playing alongside his brother. So, that's one player you want to keep on a watch on. I think he's committed, but I can't recall. I just wrote about him, but I've written about so many teams in the past few weeks that they're all running together. Linebacker, if you went to Verona's games last year, Braylon Hood, he is like a freight train when he's coming at you. I mean, he's quick. He hits hard. Donzel Jones-Teal, another one of those giants at Armstrong. Thinking of Romello Perry at Huguenot. LaDainian Brown was at Matoaka last season, was one of their best defensive players. Now he's at Highland Springs. So, I mean, it's so much talent. Defense, I mean, I'm talking about names like a Barry Holmes. Mentioned T-Ron previously at Hopewell. Jay Sean Richardson, the UVA commit. Chris Whitehead at Bird. I mean, he's one of the hottest recruits in the area. Andre Clark at Hermitage just committed to Michigan. He's a DB you need to keep an eye on. Ziggy Miller at Huguenot. Nyon Mason, he announced himself to the world last year against Matoaka. I think that's just – I mean, I could go on and on, but you get the point.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. And also on the opposite spectrum, what are some players in the 804 that could have a breakout season?
Yeah, so I'm going back to the Hermitage. They've got some youngsters that are going to be making some noise maybe this year and definitely in the seasons ahead. Aaron Brooks has two sons at Hermitage, Tyson and Miles. Tyson's a receiver. Miles is quarterback. Those two could be seeing some big things from them this season. Daryl Woodson at defensive end for Hermitage. He's a beast from what I've seen on film. Jaden Magpie, I believe is his name. He's a wide receiver for Hermitage, kind of like an Andre Clark. This kid is 6'5", I mean, that you want that kind of player on your team. 6'5", who's going to be able to go up there and get the ball from him? I'm thinking about Luke Roberts at Godwin. He's a young and up-and-coming quarterback. Another quarterback, there's been a lot of talk of Hopewell this offseason, of them having one of those runs. They have a quarterback that played linebacker and tight end last year. He's transformed his body to be a quarterback. I'm curious to see what he can do. I have him listed as a breakout player, but he's more like a curiosity player. If he is everything that I hear he could be, then that's going to be a fun watch. Number 6 is not in Dinwiddie anymore, but Zion Bosa is making some noise from what I hear down there. Landon Hicks at Manchester, wide receiver. He had a solid season last year. He's picked up some offers. I think he's going to have a big one this year. And then there's a defensive back down at Thomas Dale, Chris Ward. He has caught the interest of recruiters, and I pay attention to recruiters. If they're looking at somebody, that tells me they think that he's going to be special.
And so we'll talk about actually this week under the lights. So I know, Danny, you got a double dip this week because you'll be going to Glen Allen and Prince George Thursday night, correct?
Correct.
And then Friday is Huguenot at St. Chris, right?
Yes.
So as we to mention this, what are some other games to watch in week one?
Yeah, so Atlee Freeman could be interesting. Freeman was good last year. They had this running back, Butter Stevenson. He graduated, but Freeman always seems to find these kids that they can just plug and play. So I'm interested to see if Freeman can pick up the baton and keep going. And Atlee is one of those teams that's always teetering on making the playoffs. So this game should be interesting to determine what kind of season we're going to see from both of them. Obviously, Hopewell, Holland Springs, a lot of chatter about Hopewell this offseason. Obviously, we know you can't mention the football season without mentioning Holland Springs, so that's going to be a great game. Norcom, Thomas Jefferson. Norcom's always a perennial playoff contender down there in the 757. Bird, Midlothian. That's we have one of our guys, Jared Jenkins at Virginia Preps. He's going to be going to that game. Bird lost a lot of talent. I mean, I can't think of another team in the 804 that lost as much to graduation as they did. So they, Bird is Bird. They're one of those teams like a Holland Springs and Verona that you don't rebuild, you reload, but it's tough to do so quickly in your first game of the season, and you're going up against a very good Midlothian team. So that's one to watch. Matoaka Hermitage, great game to see how Matoaka responds. Again, like Bird, heavy losses to graduation, and Hermitage is a up-and-coming team in the region. It sounds weird to say Hermitage is up-and-coming because they've always been here, but they will make some noise with some of these cats they got this year. Pun intended, by the way. Prince George, Glen Allen, obviously, I'm going to be there. And yeah, that and the games I'm at, those are your headliners this week.
Yeah, yes, indeed, man. Pumped about this week. Pumped about high school football. Most definitely. So before we round it out tonight, Danny, just final thoughts and where they can find you on social media and anything that's upcoming that you got going on.
Oh gosh, I don't even know where to start. It's hard to say what I got going. I've been so involved in previews for the past month that now I'm kind of able to breathe for a moment and get ready to do the season. So, Obviously the biggest thing on my horizon is just the in-season coverage. Players of the Week articles will be coming out each week. Predictions are going to be coming out each week, recaps of the week. You can find all that stuff at Virginia Preps. However, not a lot of people know this, but Virginia Preps was owned by Rivals. Rivals was bought this summer by On3. So VirginiaPreps.com is actually on3 now. So you have to do a little searching for us, but we're still there and we're still at games and we're still bringing the same coverage that we always bring.
Yes, indeed. And once again, Danny, definitely appreciate you for coming on. We're definitely going to have you on. We talked about it at Media Day. Definitely want to have you on at least once a month or maybe twice a month. We'll all kind of iron out the details. So we're gonna definitely gonna have you on board here on Under the Lights 804. Once again, definitely appreciate you for coming on our debut episode here. We turned essentially a preview that we did once a month, once a year, and then we did like the mid-season. Now we're gonna do this thing weekly, and definitely glad that you're going to be a part of this. And yeah, man, definitely appreciate you for coming on. And this wraps up episode 1, and we catch you guys next week. And we're out.